In this video, I'm going to introduce a new programming concept. It's called the for loop, okay? And it's used everywhere in all programming language. Here, of course, I'm going to introduce it specific to MATLAB. All right. First, let me go to the right directory, okay? Because I'm going to save some functions in this video. So the for loop, what is it? Well, for. It's used to repeat a set of commands multiple times. Okay, so imagine you have a set of commands that you want to do multiple times. Well, you're going to use a for loops. This for loop is going to use some integer. Okay, integer was going to change value at every step of the loop. All right, and you're going to use the value of this integer to figure out where you are in the loop at each step. Okay, and you can even use this integer, okay, to change slightly the result of the calculation you make at every step. Okay, so it's important to do some examples to really understand what's happening. So we're going to do 3 examples here. First, let me create a function. Okay, so remember the general templates for functions. Okay, function is a keyword with end as well, so don't touch them. Here we have the output arguments, name of the function, which I'm going to call loop1, okay, and the input argument. Now in this example, what I'm going to do is I'm going to compute and print the squares of all the integers between 1 and 10, okay? So basically I don't need any inputs or outputs here, okay? So I get rid of all that. So it's important to know that when you create a MATLAB functions, okay, input and outputs are optional, okay? You don't need them all the time, okay? You need them if you need to change the value of an input, okay, when you call a function several times. All right. So I'm going to leave a quick comment explaining what I'm going to do here, okay? And here, this code is going to compute and print the squares of all integers between 1 and 10. Okay, so how do we do that? Well, the for loop uses a keyword which is called for. Okay, now what's happening? Well, we're gonna use, as I said, an integer, okay, to figure out at which step of the loop we are, right? So we're gonna increment the value of this integer by 1 every time at each step, okay? So you can give this integer a name that you want, okay? You can call it I, you can call it N, you can call it P, you can call it whatever you want, okay? Of course, don't use a number, use a letter, okay? So here I'm gonna use I, for example. So for I, going from 1 to 10 here, okay? So here, I should say, that's equal here, okay? So I is gonna take all the successive values between 1 and 10. So at the first step, I is gonna be 1, at the second step is gonna be 2, then 3, then 4, etc., until it reaches 10, okay? So basically, the command I'm gonna write here is gonna be executed 10 times, okay, for all the possible values of I. And here I wanna print the square of all integers between 1 and 10. So I want to, at step 1, I want to print 1 squared, at step 2, 2 squared, then 3 squared, 4 squared, etc. So because at the first step of the loop, I is going to be 1, at the second step, it's going to be 2, at the third step is going to be 3, etc. Here, what I want to print is I squared, okay? Because that way, at every step of my loop, okay, I'm gonna print I squared. So that's why I don't put any semicolon here, okay, to print. And then I finish my for loop with end. It's another keyword, okay, which says that we end the for loop. And that's it, okay, our program is done here. So I'm gonna save that, make sure the name loop1 of the file is the name of that of the function, good. All right. And then I'm going to call loop1 in the command window here, loop 1, and I should print all the squares of all the numbers between 1 and 10, okay? And if I do that, that's exactly what I get, okay? So you see 1, 4, 9, 16, 25, 36, 49, which these are all the squares, okay, of the first 10 integers, okay? All right, so this is a very simple loop, okay? Now let me create a second one, which is slightly more complicated, but it's very similar to the first one. So I create a new function, okay? I go back to my editor here, and this time I'm gonna create a loop, okay, similar to that one, which is gonna print the square of some integers as well. But this time I'm gonna set the starting integer and the ending integer as input arguments of the function. Okay, so here I print all the integers from 1 to 10, okay, so the for loop is going from 1 to 10. This time I'm gonna set these parameters as inputs. So let's call this function loop2. I still don't have any output here because I'm gonna print the result directly within the function. But this time I have two input arguments. So n start, I'm gonna call them, and n end. All right. So what am I gonna do here? So this program computes and prints the square of all integers from n start to n end this time, okay? So the only thing I have to change from my previous code is the starting and ending points of these arguments, okay? Sorry, of the index used in my for loop, okay? So this time I is gonna run from n start to n end, okay? So actually I can simply copy paste that, okay? And all I'm gonna change here is and start and end. And that's it. And just to convince you that I can have, well, the index used in the for loop can be called anything, this time I'm going to call it p. Okay, of course I need to change to p squared as well. Okay, I need to be consistent. So you see that at the first step of the loop, p is going to be equal to n start. Okay, so I'm going to compute n start squared. And then at the second step of the loop, p is going to be equal to n start plus 1, okay? We increment p by 1, sorry, okay? And we're going to compute the square of that. And then it's going to take all the values, the integer value between n start and n end. So we need to make sure that the inputs here are integers, okay? All right, so let's save that. And it's called loop2, that's all good. And I'm gonna call here loop2. Now remember, we need to input arguments here. So for example, if I want all the squares, well, from 1 to 10, okay, so n start should be 1 and n end should be 10, okay, to make sure I got the same result as before. If I do that, I have exactly the same result indeed, okay. But this time I can do whatever I want. I can go from 5 to 25 if I want. Okay, so I should have 21 values here, and you see I compute the square of all integers between 5 and 25. Okay, I start from 5 squared, 6 squared, 7 squared, etc. until 25 squared, which is 625. Okay, and 24 squared, which is 576. Okay, all right, all good. So now let me create a third function, okay, which is going to combine the use of arrays and for loops. And for loops are very useful and work really well with arrays, okay, because what do we do with arrays? Well, we fill it with different values, okay? So if we have some kind of rules that define which value to put for each element of the array, well, we can do that using a for loop, and at every step of the loop we define one element of the array. Okay. So let me call this function loop3. Okay, and here what are we going to do? Well, we want to compute the 31st odd numbers, and we want to store them in an array. Okay, so that's all we want to do, and we want to return that from the function. So this time we don't have no input, but we have an output x, which is going to be the array containing all the 31st odd numbers. Okay, so first what I'm going to do, well, just describe quickly what you do. So you compute the 31st odd numbers and stores them in the array x. Okay, it's all good. Then what do we do? Well, first we want to initialize our array. This is always the way it has to go. Okay, when we're gonna store value in an array, first you define the array and you initialize it. And how do you initialize it? Well, you give it the proper length, okay, so the number of elements, and you fill it with zeros. So we initialize. So x is defined as zeros of 130. So if you remember what that does, okay, that creates an array with 30 elements where all the elements are zeros. Okay, so it's a list of zeros basically. So now we have fixed basically the size of our array x. And then we're simply gonna do a for loop, okay, where at each step of the loop, okay, we're gonna define a new element of the array x. Okay, so our for loop should go from n, say, equals to from 1 to 30, because we define all the integers from 1 to 30, the odd integers. Okay, and this time what's going to happen at every step of the loop? Well, the entry number n, so x of n, is going to be equal to the nth odd number. Okay, so what is the nth odd number? Well, if n equals 1, okay, then the odd number it should be 1, right? Because this is the first odd number. And then when n equals 2, we should get 3. And when n equals 3, we should get 5. Okay, so there is a formula that defines all the odd numbers. Okay, for n, the nth odd number is 2 times n minus 1. Okay, because 2 times n minus 1. Okay, and I put a semicolon here not to print the result, and I end. So let's see if it really works. Okay, when n equals 1, then here in this formula n is going to be 1, so I have 2 times 1 minus 1. 2 minus 1 is 1. So x of 1, the first value of my so the first element of my array x is going to be equal to 1. Then n at the second step of the loop is going to be equal to 2. Okay, so when n equals 2, I have 2 times 2, 4 minus 1 equals 3. So x of 2, the second element or the second entry of my array, is going to be equal to 3. And then when n equals 3 at the next step of the for loop, I have 2 times 3 equals 6 minus 1, 5. So that works. Okay, x of 3 is going to be equal to 5. All right, so that's what I have. So let me save that, loop 3, okay, and see if it works. I'm going to call loop 3, and I do have the 31st odd numbers, okay, for all the way from 1 to 59. Okay, so this is just an example on how to combine arrays and for loops, and especially to use for loops to fill in arrays basically, and we're going to use that a lot in this course. And this ends this video.